Let's just get started. So I'm gonna do a quick introduction and we'll jump right in. So hello everyone. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm the content marketing manager here at Elevation. Quick update about what Elevation is. Elevation Web, we are a digital solutions agency designed to equip nonprofit organizations like yourselves with the digital tools they need to really make an impact in this overwhelmingly tech-dominated world now. So I'm super excited to kick off today's webinar because today is the first of our new webinar series, which is Nonprofit Technology Explained. Every month, we're going to be featuring the best tech options designed for nonprofits. So we'll be explaining what the technology is, why it's important, how it plays into your nonprofit's digital strategy, and what you can expect from the technology down the line and into the future. So these episodes are going to be designed for people that are interested in starting a nonprofit, those coming over from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world, and those already well established in the nonprofit industry, hoping to either up their game or take a look into, are they really using the technology to get everything they can out of it? So I think there's something for everyone here. We're really breaking it down to the basics. So to start things off today, we are going to be talking all about the Nonprofit CRM, obviously. David Cady is joining us from Virtuous Software. They've created a CRM designed specifically for the nonprofit, and he knows everything about nonprofit CRMs, and he'll be jumping in to introduce himself in a little bit. Today, I would love for this webinar to be very much for you guys. So if you have questions, please throw them into the chat, throw them into the Q&A, and we also took down all of your questions that you submitted as you were signing up. And so we would love to hear from, and we'll be responding to those throughout as well. We will be also sending out a recording of this webinar at the end. So look for that either late tonight or tomorrow morning. It'll be sent to your inboxes. So thank you guys so much. And so we have David with us. Hey, David.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks so much for that great intro.
Of course. Thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. Yeah, we're looking forward to kicking things off, guys. And yeah, we'll keep this open. I want to make sure we answer questions as we go. And yes, full disclosure, Virtuous is a CRM. We're not going to be talking a lot about Virtuous specifically today. We're actually just going to take a step back and really understand kind of these agenda points. One, like, what is a CRM? Where does it come from? How has it evolved? What's really changed, and how has things looked over the last 20 years? As you're kind of either dipping your toe in the water and looking for something new, like, what can you look for? What should you look for? Really importantly, how do you prepare for and even use a CRM? And then we'll have some kind of closing thoughts on, well, where do we see the world going in this space? And so please make sure the Q&A box, continue to throw questions in there, as well as the chat, and we'll make sure to answer them as we go. Okay, so to kind of get started, we'll talk a little bit just about where the CRM world came from, what it means, how it's transitioned. So just as a little bit of an introduction, so just the word CRM, it stands for Customer Relationship Management. The word and the acronyms have changed over time. In the nonprofit world, sometimes you hear donor management system. Sometimes you see CRM referred to as constituent relationship management. Really, they're all the same idea, right? It's a ubiquitous idea where the whole goal of these systems, right, is to capture, track, and manage information about your donors. But here's kind of how things have changed and where things got started. So really, the world of CRM did get started in the 80s, and this was the world of kind of database marketing. So tools like Act, Goldmine, Blackbaud were coming out here, and a lot of the goal of these systems was truly just a database. The goal was to collect and store information, because then we're going to use that to pull information out and do big mass marketing. So big mailings, big emails. It was really just a way to collect and store big information. What started to happen after that is you started to have these companies, like these big ERP companies like SAP, Oracle, Siebel. They started to create more specific focused CRMs that were for sales teams and marketing teams to really manage the relational side of customer relationships. And so you saw these big, heavy CRMs start to come out from big software companies in the 90s. As the cloud kind of became a thing, right, software was moving away from needing to be installed on local machines and moving to the cloud, you saw a big rise of a lot of internet-based CRMs like Salesforce. Microsoft was getting into the game, Zoho and Sugar. What's happened since then is now that the technology has been kind of caught up and it's really easy to get access to good technology, the focus of CRMs has started to get really laser focused on how do we actually make sure that this is a system that focuses on our interactions rather than just storing transactional information. And so it was much more of how do we help with relationship building, how do we help better serve our customer, better serve our donors. And there was a big growth in very industry-specific CRMs. And so, especially if you look out today and you're just Googling CRM and nonprofit CRM, there's a lot of stuff out there, more so than there ever used to be. Here's kind of, though, a lot of the nonprofit world the technology hasn't transitioned as quickly as some other industries. And so a lot of the systems today that are out there, if you've had one for a while, they're really built still on that idea of database marketing, where the whole idea was to just collect and store data. So data is incredibly important, but it's ultimately how we use that. And so a lot of these systems were kind of function today like accounting systems. And we want to make sure that our CRMs today are focused on donor relationships. And ultimately, right, we don't want our CRM to be treated like an accounting system, because when that happens, right, it starts to just create habits of, you know, if a transaction, if a gift is just purely that, we start to treat donors like transactions. And we know donors are human beings, and we want to make sure that they feel a big connection to the cause. So that's kind of where the world has moved and transitioned over time. I think the biggest thing now is CRMs especially should be focused on your outcome, your big goal. There's not a one-size-fits-all anymore. There's not these big, heavy software tools. And really they focused on how do we help solve the big problems and very specific problems and do them exceptionally well. So we want to kind of now see, so that's kind of where the software's been, how it's progressed, a little bit about what it means. But let's just take it even a bigger step back and just understand what's shifted and what's happened in the world from a technology perspective, just from as consumers and interacting with the world, what's changed over the last 20 years. So you may have heard about this thing called the internet. Pretty big deal, right? It's really fundamentally shifted how we can experience the world. And that's been a huge thing that's happened in the last 20 years. And so we can drill in a little further to understand, like, how does the internet even evolved and how that has affected expectations from donors and how we can really attack those and accomplish our goals when we're using CRM. So if we pop on our time machine here, we'll go all the way back to 1996, right? It doesn't even seem like that long ago. But if we went back to 1996 and went to Amazon.com, that's what it would have looked like. And so the world of the 90s and back then was really focused around one-to-many. The internet and everything was one-to-many. Every person got the same experience. They saw the same website, same newsletter, same mailings, same emails. It was very much a one-to-many. And that worked, right? And the databases of those times and the CRMs of those times were built to collect and store information. So then you could kind of do the very large mass appeal emails, direct mail. Fast forward to today, and this is what Amazon looks like, right? So this is actually a real page from our founder at Virtuous. And everything today is trying to use information to serve up a much more personalized experience. So you can see, right, Amazon's now saying, hey, you should probably buy more tube socks for your kids, some more videos, right? All of these school supplies. It's trying to say, hey, we're going to give you a slightly more personal experience. Because one, at the end of the day, Amazon wants to make sure that they can sell more and they feel like they know their customer. But ultimately, this is what the world has shifted to, and folks are starting to expect this everywhere they go. And so we're starting to see, as the kind of the shift of the internet has happened, that donors expect this too. Now, we actually believe that giving is already by nature, when you're giving of your time, when you're giving of your money, it's a very personal thing. So inherently, the work and the nature, right, of giving in nonprofits is personal. And now layer on the fact that every other brand experience, any place that they're going today, is trying to create more personal experiences. So we have this kind of conundrum of the nature of the work is already incredibly personal, and donors are getting very personalized experience everywhere else, that we actually think nonprofits who can make this shift and really enable using technology to personalize every single engagement with donors are the ones that are actually going to make the biggest leap forward in today's world.
I actually find that really interesting also, because we're hearing about that so much more, of like the tracking of data and things like that. And we oftentimes think it's like kind of a scary thing of like, oh, how do you know this about me? But it's also become, like you mentioned, a very like assumed thing that it will happen. Like these brands know what I'm expecting. And when brands don't follow this and give you something that you don't want, you often see that as like a little bit losing of like their credibility. So it's kind of a little cognitive dissonance in consumers' minds these days, at least what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's true. And, you know, it's interesting too, because I understand a little bit of the pushback, especially when you think about like retail and right, the consumerism in the world. There's a little bit of pushback of like, hey, I want to be a little private. But right, the nature of nonprofits, that these donors, they want to be a part of something. They genuinely want to be a part of your movement. And so they want to be known. They want to be included. And there is a big desire. And so I actually think, right, that same idea of like, hey, we want to make sure to respect their privacy. Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to be unkind and spam them. And we want to make sure everything we're sending is relevant. But I think the donors really have an expectation of, I want to be a part of something. This is incredibly important. And so it's actually, we think.
Yeah, it's a great way to track that and follow that along and make sure that no one gets left behind in a way too.
Mm-hmm.
A quick update, my Zoom has frozen. So if we're getting chats or messages, I currently cannot see them. So David, if you want to kind of take a look at those and follow along, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I absolutely will. I've got them all open. So if you do have questions that we can answer on the call, we will do that. And if there's stuff that we can answer afterwards, it's easier. We'll make sure to get all those answers out too. You know, I love this quote too, when you kind of just think about just what shifted in the world and kind of how we need to approach using technology is from the New York Times. It says, modern donors expect transparency, sophisticated storytelling, and technical savvy from their charitable organizations. And they'll not only give money, but lend, right, volunteer and lend their entire force of their social networks for the cause they believe in. Is people want to give their whole selves. That's a huge thing for us as a donor's entire person. How do we leverage and make sure that we can know their superpowers as a donor and make sure that they are, we're including them as best we can. So we kind of talked about where CRMs came from, what that kind of path has looked like, a little bit of just overall what's shifted in the world from a technology perspective, how the internet's really fundamentally changed expectations. Now we can really talk about, well, maybe I'm looking at a CRM, maybe I'm just getting started as a nonprofit. What should I even look for? How do I prioritize what matters? So the fun answer to all of that is, it depends. I know that's not the answer everyone wanted to hear, but bear with me because we will get actually into some functional, real ideas. But I wanted to give an example, right? I've been working with CRMs in the software world for the last 12 years, big and small to all different sizes of industries. And the one thing that I've seen happen over and over again is there's almost too much of a dependency that your CRM is going to be a silver bullet, that it will be the answer to all problems, that somehow if we buy this and we just turn it on, that things will magically just kind of happen. And ultimately, too, CRMs and any software that you buy is a tool. It is just that, a tool. And if I went to Home Depot and I bought a hammer and a saw, and I put it in front of empty lot, it's not going to build a house for me, right? People build houses. And so a big part of why does it depend is because we really need to understand, what are you looking to change? The biggest reason that someone buys software or gets a CRM is they're looking to do something different. They're looking to change something, improve something. And so to really understand what type of tool fits best is you really need to understand what is the problem I'm trying to solve. And a good example would be, if you do Google Nonprofit CRM or CRM in general, you're bombarded with a ton of marketing, a ton of feature lists, and everything looks amazing from the get-go because feature lists are really easy to build out. But I'll give you an example, right? Maybe I've got a giant redwood and I want to cut it down. Now, we would never want to cut redwoods down. They're fantastic trees, but this is just an example. So if I had a redwood, would I use an axe or would I use a chainsaw? Probably a chainsaw. Now, why? It's because I'm cutting a redwood down and not my little, oak tree in my backyard. And I need something that's specifically built for that purpose, right? And if you think about an axe and a chainsaw, if you just have like a feature list of both, they would say a lot of the same things, right? Can cut things, it's sharp, made of metal, right? All those things can give you a false sense of yeah, this could do the work. But ultimately, what's best is that chainsaw. So silly example, but I definitely, right, we wouldn't use that in the real world. And so we want to make sure that we ultimately can define our problem really, really well. So I do want to talk, though, about what are just some table stakes for a modern CRM today. What should you absolutely look for? So ultimately, right, the first kind of problem a CRM should help you solve is we want to make sure that we can collect, store, and track all the information about our donors. The biggest part, right, is just knowing who they are first. That's the biggest answer. And so a CRM is purposefully designed to be able to collect and store that information in a way that it's easy to understand, easy to report on, quickly be able to kind of look at your metrics, your fundraising metrics overall, and understand the health of the organization. And so to just get to that level, right, we want to make sure that there are some of these bullet points on here. Yeah, we should have a way to store our contacts. We should have a way to look at gifts. We should have ways to kind of track notes and communication and emails, be able to really segment with personas, understand different types of donors. Some other things here too, it would be great, right, if we had some grant management, volunteer management was involved. But ultimately, right, I won't go through every single one of these bullets. At the end of the day, right, we want to be able to store information. So when do you need a CRM? That's a good question. So I like to think about kind of when you look at like kind of a cost benefits analysis there. If you're getting started and you have 100 donors, you can actually manage a ton of that in Excel, right? This is coming from someone who works for a CRM company who would like to make sure that more people use Virtuous. But ultimately, right, that's a good place to start because you're going to be able to meet a lot of those table stakes things right now. As you start to get a little bigger and more complex, and you maybe have multiple projects and designations that people can give to, then you might say, hey, I need something that's more than just a spreadsheet. I need something that's a little bit more purpose-built for my world. A nonprofit CRM is a great place to start there. So the next kind of level is what I call CRM 2.0. These are some of the things that are more prevalent in modern CRMs today, especially ones that are purpose-built for the nonprofit world that can really help move the needle. One is integrations. So this is a big deal today because software is a big proliferation in software. Lots of different types for different uses, for different industries, for all different shapes and sizes. And so you want to be able to easily move data between one system and the next. That might be pre-built integrations. It might be what's called an API. that allows you to push data back and forth between systems. But your system should be open. It should not hold your data hostage. It should not require you to bolt on a product from the same company. It should be able to allow you to say, hey, you can freely move your data that you own between systems very easily. Mobile apps. Most people don't even get on a computer anymore if they're going to be using CRMs. So you really should say, hey, how, especially if we have fundraisers on the go or anyone who's doing development work that travels, giving them the opportunity to access this without having to open up their laptop is huge. One of the things that's really neat, right, is data is becoming more prevalent. There's more amounts of it. So how easily, right, can you get access to that? Can you easily use tools like business intelligence tools to look at your data? One thing that we love at Virtuous that's really important to us is this idea of automation. We think there's kind of two big issues. One is we need to know and understand our donors. So we need to collect information, store it, analyze it, know it. But then really, ultimately, it's how are we going to take action on this data to use it to personalize every single engagement with every single donor. A lot of that can be done through tools like automation tools that can help you automate manual tasks, that can help do outreach and specifically based on donor behavior. Lots of neat tools there.
For the automation, could you maybe give a quick example for a way that people can utilize that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just kind of taking a step back, one of the things that we care about at Virtuous is we believe that every donor deserves a personal experience, but you only have so much time in the day. And so, a lot of times as our organizations start to grow, major donors, they get a lot of personal attention, and they should, right? They are a lot of times the lifeblood of organizations. And so there's a reason that we spend time with them, that we get to know them, that we engage them, because those relationships matter. And so we start to think as that grows, as you start to grow, what we don't want to happen is kind of that bottom 90% to fall into what we call the newsletter bucket, where everyone gets the dear friends direct mail piece and it's very impersonal. And so automation can help you give a level of personalization to every donor. And so here's an example that we've seen a couple things. So one common thing that we'll do when we get customers using Virtuous is a welcome series. Very simple to say, hey, anytime a first-time gift comes in, we want a 5-email welcome series to go out. Right? That's about as simple of an automation as you can start with. But the goal there is if we can consistently make sure that every single person who gives, make sure that they get a personal follow-up, that's huge. Then you can start to get a little more granular. The big thing that we care about too at Virtuous is start small, test everything, and optimize based on your testing. So what you could do is say, hey, there's a lot of people that really click on that third email. Let's grab some of that content and maybe we'll put it on our website or do some things with that there. But the other thing you could do is even start to differentiate to say, hey, you know what? If a first-time gift comes in and it's over $1,000, we want to make sure that they get a slightly different follow-up because we're going to include, right, a note from our executive director. We want to make sure that they get a call, and maybe there's a text message in there inviting them to a special event. And so as you start to think about what is our donor's journey, when they give a gift, what do we want to happen next? Do we want a second gift? Do we want them to come to an event? Do we want them to read this story on our website? And you've probably even sat down to think about this in your office is like, what is the kind of donor journey? And what are those steps? And where's the human interaction there? Where's maybe an email, a direct mail piece, a text message, all of that going out? And automation is really designed to say, hey, let's architect that. Let's figure out the strategy. And then using a tool like Virtuous, you can automate a lot of that follow-up. So the whole idea is we want to give you a fundraiser without having to hire a fundraiser and be able to really extend how much you can do as a single person. That help answer?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will add too, we'll talk about this later. Again, CRMs are just tools. Automation is an amazing tool, but it's only as good as the strategy and thought and planning that goes in ahead of that. And so part of that is twofold. You have to know your donors, understand who they are, store that data, really dig into it, and then strategize how do we want to communicate to them. And then that's when your tool gets put to work. Some other things too, right? We really believe that today especially, we want you to know the whole person. So CRMs that can help you understand their social media behavior, location data, relationships, and then some predictive analytics tools to help you even understand what the data is telling you, so you can get a whole picture to say, hey, you know, this person might not be financially inclined, but they've got a really big Twitter following, so we want to make sure that they're included in our next campaign with a specific link to say, hey, share this on Twitter for us. And so ultimately, right, the big things are we want you to know beyond just their giving. Who are they as a person? What makes them tick? So then you can really understand their superpowers. Okay. So now we're going to talk about how to plan for, utilize, and get the most out of your CRM. So this is actually one of my favorite parts because it's actually not about the technology at all. Ultimately, when you're looking at investing in a CRM or any software for that matter, the biggest thing is it's not about the technology, it's about the change that's about to happen. And if we know anything about human nature is generally people don't love to change. And so preparing for change, that is one of the biggest things that you can do when you're moving to any new CRM. And so I said it before, software doesn't do anything, people do. It ultimately boils down to people. And so the greatest software in the world, right, if it just sits there on my computer, it doesn't do anything. It won't be utilized. It won't be really efficient if it's not utilized in the best way. And so the thing I'll say when we talk to our customers is, you know, they're asking, well, what am I not thinking about? What am I not preparing for? You know, moving data from one system to the next is pretty easy, straightforward, right? Getting you trained, pretty easy. The whole part, though, is the change management, thinking about how will this affect people's processes? Will this create a new department? Will this be able to allow us to, you know, create new messaging? And so we're going to need marketing involved. Lots of different things come into play. And I always like to say, anytime you're thinking about using new software, treat it as you would a new employee, right? If you're investing in hiring a new employee and it's their first day, you don't just sit them down in a seat and walk away, right? You are invested in their success by making sure that they're trained, that they understand your processes, that you go through some onboarding, that they know their goals, that they can measure them, and that you set up a plan and you constantly review it. I like to think that software is just your digital employee. It works in the same way. You need to understand, well, what are the goals? Why did we get this in the first place? How are we going to measure success? What are the processes and procedures that are going to come with this? How do we make sure the team is rallied around this and we have our big why statement? That planning and preparation is the biggest key to making sure that any change happens well. And so I'm actually sharing now a little document that I love because it really, this works for any time big changes are happening, but especially with a CRM implementation, it does change how people work, how you're going to reach your donors, how processes and operations happen. And so you kind of see across the top, there are 5 things that they say that you really need anytime there's a complex change. 1, you need vision. This is your why statement. Why in the world are we doing this? Where are we going? And what's the big outcome? You need skills. So you need to invest in training. You need to make sure that you understand the systems, that you're doing this efficiently. You need to make sure that people have incentives around this. Hey, this is going to give you time back in your day. This is going to help you reach more donors. There has to be a personal win for folks. You need resources. Time and money, it needs to be spent. It's pretty obvious. And you need to make sure that there are resources for that. And then ultimately a plan. And you'll see if you have all 5 of those, you can change. But if you're missing 1 or more of those, you see kind of down below that all those different things can start to happen. If you have all the tools, but you don't have a vision, people are confused, like, why are we even doing this? Right? If you have everything but no skills, people are anxious because they don't feel empowered. right? All you can kind of see as we go down: resistance, frustration, and false starts. Ultimately, those 5 things, when you have those in order, then your software, you'll really be able to get the most out of. So maybe you don't want to be sitting down and doing all this. Here are just some simple steps to start with. Anytime you're saying, hey, we're going to make a new software purchase, we're going to start using the CRM. One, understand your goals, write down and set your goals. One really good way to do this is what is called the 5 whys. It's actually came out of Toyota and their manufacturing process. It's been used in Six Sigma consulting. But basically, anytime you're looking to change and you say, hey, I need to buy a new CRM, you need to ask yourself why 5 times. Why do we need to buy a new CRM? Well, because our data is unorganized and it's all over the place. Well, why? Well, it's because everyone's been managing on different spreadsheets. Well, and then continue to kind of go down that funnel. Or maybe it's, hey, we need to buy our CRM because we're not able to reach all the donors we want to. And then continue to go down that why. And then you'll really get down to the meat of, we're not set aside enough time. We need to make sure that we're invested in training. You'll really understand the outcome in those goals. So 5 whys for any big decision or any big change. Start there. Big thing is prioritize your return on investment, especially when you're going to be spending precious time and money. You need to know, how quickly can we get to our goals? How quickly is it going to take so we can make sure we recoup this investment, that people are getting time back in their day, and how are we going to measure that? One thing that I think is important today as well is, again, the software in general, especially CRMs, the team who's closest to the impact and the outcome should lead the decision. I know there's a lot of times a feeling like, hey, we should have a large consensus, everyone should have a say. But ultimately, the people who own the outcome, they should be the ones that lead the decision. I like to say, and it's kind of a little dark, but the people who will get fired if this doesn't work, they should be the ones that ultimately own that decision. Because, right, they're the ones that either have that number of raising more money or reaching more donors. And then the last one is over-communicate. Any change, and especially if you're adopting a new CRM, this can affect multiple departments, job process roles, all of these different things. And so you want to make sure that everyone feels informed, understands your why, understands those goals, because when they can have a bigger thing that they rally around to say, hey, this is going to be hard for a while. Change is tough. People don't always like to shift. But if we understand that when we get out of this, we're going to see these big increases here, or more donor retention here, or people are going to be able to get home on time and not spending their January doing receipts and all of those different things. Make sure that that's heavily communicated. All right, so some of the fun stuff is, where in the world is the CRM world headed? Now, there's a ton of cool new technology out there, from artificial intelligence to look at your data, from automation tools that allow you to create, get rid of your manual processes. Very neat things out there. The biggest thing that we see is that the CRM world is becoming commoditized. At the end of the day, your CRM should absolutely be more than just a database. There are some awesome database tools. Excel is a database tool, right? You need to be able to have something that does more than just store your data. It needs to be a tool that really helps you grow. It should be enabling your fundraisers, your marketers to do more. And so whether it is predictive analytics or artificial intelligence or being able to accept Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, the biggest thing is make sure that your CRM is ultimately there to help your donor. If we don't use that data well to make sure our donors are loved on and cared for, it can be the greatest tool in the world, but that's the biggest thing that we need to care about. And so again, things that we're working on at Virtuous, really are, how do we use technology to make sure every single person, whether you're a $5 donor or a $5 million donor, feels just as loved and included as the major donors do? And how do we do that without having to hire armies of people to do the work, or really manual, laborious, complex processes to do it? We want to make sure that every donor has that same experience with you as they do with other places that they're getting personalized experiences, and ultimately, right, feel that they're a part of something. So we'll actually spend a good amount of time kind of walking through questions and answering some of these here. But I did want to say some more content, some more kind of guides that we have around just how to think through CRMs is on the Virtuous website at virtuouscrm.com/guide. If you go there, you'll be able to download our definitive guide to nonprofit CRM. So we'll leave that up, virtuouscrm.com/guide.
And I'll throw a link into the follow-up email that you guys will be receiving either tonight or tomorrow.
And then please, as we're going now, throw questions in the Q&A or chat. I do have some here that I'd like to kind of talk through to help kind of give some folks some insights. Is there anything else that you, before we dive into Q&A?
No, I think that was a really great overview, and I think we're ready to move on, yeah. Okay,
perfect. All right, so one question that we had that came in early, which I love, it's a really smart question, is CRMs are costly. How do we justify and explain spending so much money on a CRM? And it's a very true statement, right? It is an investment, for sure. You are spending time and resources to get new technology. So ultimately, the biggest thing there is kind of the question that you need to think through is, what is the cost of doing nothing? And then how are we going to kind of get to our big goals down both paths? And so you really can start to think about, okay, generally a CRM should be helping you with some things like reducing the amount of time you're spending on just managing data. It should be able to help extend your reach so you can reach more people in a larger swath than you could if you were just trying to like make a bunch of calls or send a bunch of personal emails during the day. And so you know, just think about how many staff and time does it take right now to say track a gift and receipt them, right? That could be a half-day process. And then how much time does it take to make sure that the donor gets a 3-email welcome series? What does that look like? How much are we spending on time? And would we need to hire more folks to be able to scale as we have our goals? And so ultimately, there are a lot of things that we have an ROI calculator that we use at Virtuous that can help you understand, you know, if you got a 5% increase in your average gift, if you're able to reduce time by 10%, you can use that to kind of plug in some numbers. So again, if you go to virtuouscrm.com/guide, and if you feel like you'd like to talk to one of our teams, we can absolutely share that. But the biggest thing I'll say is, you know, what's the cost of doing nothing? How do we gonna, you know, whether it's time and resources, and then kind of cost compare. There might be some points where you say, hey, the way we're at right now, it's not worth the investment yet, and that's okay. Ultimately, you want to make sure that you're getting the right tool for the right job at the time you need it.
I've got one kind of question, kind of branching off that, but about the idea of the automation and the saving time of like tracking different things. How often do you think you should be checking on your automations to ensure that they're either optimized or working properly? Like, should we be checking them every week, every month? What's kind of the time frame you would suggest?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We definitely believe that testing and optimizing is really big. There is never a one-size-fits-all approach to, especially when you think about your donors. They're varied in age and demographics and how long they've been a donor, and each one might respond differently. They might like more digital, they might like more direct mail, phone. And so a big piece of that, you know, one is, if you have the time, I think weekly is great. You obviously need to have enough of a sample size. And so I think initially it's one, just starting small, and then just iterating from there. So say, hey, let's start with a 5-email welcome series. Let's make sure it goes out to, you know, at least 1,000 people over time, and then figure out which email performed the best. Now maybe let's grab that email, the copy there, maybe there was a specific video, and let's take some of those principles, put it in another email and see if that starts to perform better. And so ultimately, I do think, weekly is great, but you also might not have that time. And so I think committing just to do that on a monthly basis, doing it small enough that it's not overwhelming, because it's the neat part is you don't have to change everything. It might just be, hey, if I added this video in, or if we maybe sent this a couple days later, that could make a big difference.
Absolutely. All right, great. And then we have one question here. Ruth has asked, she says, it sounds to me like CRMs are all about the care and feeding of your donors. I believe that the key is that it has to be authentic. Absolutely, I agree. So how can you keep something authentic when a donor is receiving an automated thank you message for a donation that they sent?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so part of that is going to be, and I'll say too, a CRM is not always going to solve all your problems. Half of it has to be the strategy and the thought process that goes into it. And so one is, you know your organization best, so you'd be able to kind of share that story. What I will say is, especially with automation, you don't want it to feel inauthentic. And so the biggest thing there is trying to segment and get down to more specific donor personas. And so I'd say, if you do have an automated thank you series, maybe you have, 4 or 5 different designations or projects. You might have a general fund, maybe you're building a school building or digging wells in Africa. And so one way to just simply do that is say, hey, for every single donation based on which project or which designation they gave to, we're going to make sure that the stories and the things that we're saying there are more specific to what they gave to. And then maybe we could layer on to say, if they live in a certain area, maybe we have an event coming up. So they gave and they live in a certain zip code or state. We want to make sure that the development person from that state or that city calls them. We want to make sure that they also have an invite to a local event that we're doing. And so I think the one part there is, your storytelling, your messaging has to be on point. Working with folks like Elevation can really help there. But also making sure that you try to get as granular as you can when you segment out your donors. So then you can make sure that the messaging will resonate best with each. Nothing obviously beats a human call and a human touch. But I think making sure that you're consistent is a big piece too.
We have a guide actually to creating and generating those donor personas that I'll include and send out to you guys as well. It's just a really great way to start thinking about that segmentation and being able to predict certain things about your donors when you gather their information in the first place. And you can really create that more personalized feel using personalization tokens and emails, things like that, to create that authenticity too. So I'll include that because I think that would be a great resource for you guys as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had another question come in through chat I like about are CRMs just for managing donors? Could they also be used for, say, your program side for managing clients or resident data? And so that's a great question. And a big part of that is it's going to be, it depends. There are some CRMs out there that are going to be a little bit more robust that are going to, that can function across multiple departments. There are some that are very purpose-built to just do fundraising exceptionally well. And so part of that would be, it does depend a little bit on which program you're looking for. And so ultimately, I'd say, make sure that you say, what is the most important thing that we are looking to change? If it is, we want to manage our program and services side better. We're killing it on the fundraising side. Then make sure that that is kind of the priority one when you're going in. And so, there are some that can do a lot. The one thing I will say, when you kind of start to think about all-in-one providers, one, it starts to get a little more expensive when they start to do more things. And the other thing is the industry, especially in the last 10 years, has started to really specialize. So you have software tools that are incredibly specialized for what they're trying to accomplish. And so, good analogy that I've given before is, kind of when you think about all-in-one tools, is let's say it's Thanksgiving dinner. My wife says, hey, David, I really want you to go buy new flatware for all of our guests. We want to make sure everyone has an awesome experience. It's Thanksgiving. And so I'm going out, and if I came back to my wife with a spork, she would not be happy with me because, yeah, I could eat it, but that is not the ultimate intent for what I needed it for. For Thanksgiving dinner, a spork is not going to cut it. And so, right, when you think about all-in-one, ultimately, what is our big outcome? What do we need this for? And making sure you're getting the best tool for the job. And then proper planning, proper strategy can really help break down those worries of, well, what if we have to have two tools? Really, then it's making sure the strategy and the process is in place there. The barrier shouldn't be the tech tools. It really should just be what's your ultimate goal. All right.
That's great. All right. Do you have some more questions from the previous?
Yeah, and so keep them coming in on chat. One question we had here is really, how do we most effectively use our CRM to maximize fundraising efforts? That's a great question, is really just how do we even take a step back to make sure we're using it? I think there's some great resources, again, that Elevation will have around donor personas. And one of these things, the first one is when you're using a CRM, make sure that you are capturing as much data as you can. And you're focused on keeping that data organized and clean in the system, right? We want to make sure that the data is there so you can actually understand it first. And so then when you can look at and say, hey, there's actually some patterns in when people give or where they're giving from or how much they're giving or how this email function, then you can start to make better, more informed decisions. And so the big one is make sure that you stick to a data strategy that so every person that's using it, they use the same field the right way. They're consistent about how they enter notes, how they track these things, because then when you have consistency, it helps you understand it. That's when you can actually make better decisions. So I'd say if the first thing would be make sure you're using that to capture as much data as you can ahead of time. And there are a lot of other ways then that you can, once you have that, to say, let's really segment our donors, understand who they are and their personas. Great. And then we'll build some marketing campaigns. We'll do some automations on top of that. But the first really big piece is being very efficient on how you're storing, organizing, and reporting on your data. And I'd say same thing, similar question was, how does a startup nonprofit really immerse themselves with the CRM strategy is similar idea. Make sure, one, that you know how you're going to use the data, why it's important, how you're going to track it. And then start small. Test one thing and optimize. I think especially today, there's always this look of, hey, we just want a silver bullet. What has other nonprofits done? What is the best practice from this consultant? And there are some tried and true ideas that will always be true, but ultimately every donor is different. Every organization is different. And so testing and optimizing is your best friend. Yeah. We had one question there around kind of what's the difference between a tool like MailChimp and a CRM. And again, one thing I will say is the market's gotten a lot more crowded. It is a little bit more confusing, especially when you're just looking at websites out there to say, what in the world do you actually do? There's a lot of marketing fluff. And so specifically, when you think about MailChimp and Constant Contact email tools, they are specifically built to manage email marketing campaigns. So to do your email marketing, that is what they're going to do, kind of at a high level. CRM, some CRMs, Virtuous does, we actually do all the email for you. And so there are some CRMs that can do that entire marketing side. But ultimately, the big thing that's going to separate is MailChimp is going to manage and send emails. A lot of the things, like if you wanted to take a note, if you wanted to track the giving history, all of that is going to be what differentiates a CRM specifically.
And you can often link your email provider like MailChimp to your CRM. If the current CRM you're using doesn't offer that, many offer that connection, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Had one question about looking for CRMs combined with online donation platforms and event ticketing, like in an all-in-one provider. So again, I think the definition of all-in-one is going to be a little different to each person. I would just say, figure out what are your big goals, what's the outcomes, what are you looking to change specifically, how are you going to measure that, what's success going to look like, and then you can kind of use that to say, okay, based on how I know we define success, how we're going to measure it, what that outcome is, then really go to say, what's the best tool for the job? If it is a spork and you do want an all-in-one and that's going to solve it and actually get you to that goal the fastest and the quickest, then great, do that. If you think, hey, we might be limited in this one area and that's really what success is going to look like for us, don't be afraid to use multiple tools, because ultimately our jobs, our goals are to serve our donors best, and we want to make sure that's the best tool for the job. I'm obviously a little biased, and so there are some questions here about what's the best CRM in the market. I say, come check out Virtuous for sure. Come download the guide. We're happy to chat. And ultimately, our goal is to serve you, point in the right, best direction. And we truly believe just the best tool for the job. We aren't the best fit for everybody sometimes, and we want to make sure that you're served best from the get-go.
Yes, as the non-biased party here, we do have a guide for choosing a different CRM software, along with a comparison between 6 different nonprofit CRMs. So we will be sending that out and blasting that to you guys either this week or next week. So stay tuned for that. All right. Do we have any more questions there? Or we're about reached our time, so let's start.
We are. I'm all set, and no more questions here for me to answer on my side.
All right. Lovely. Well, David, I want to say thank you so much for joining today. It was such a great opportunity to have you on here, and I hope that all of you guys took something really valuable from this and can share this along with everyone who needs it. So thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Elevation. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It was my pleasure. So we'll let you go and have a great day.
Wonderful. So look out for my email. We'll be sending you guys some of those references, things like that. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We're here to help. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.